once we were on the court, it was all about winning every night.
Stacey Orlando Augmon, born August 1st, 1968. Elite athleticism, championship pedigree at UNLV, and a reputation as a relentless defender who played the game the right way. He wasn't flashy, but he was dependable, and that made him feel like a safe long-term piece. The problem was the NBA doesn't build around safe. Augmon never developed a go-to offensive skill, never demanded the ball, and was never trusted to decide games. And that quiet limitation is what ultimately capped a career that once looked destined for much more. What happened? Let's talk about it. Salute to Denzel_Jordan33 on IG for this request. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Stacey Augmon was a 6'8" wing from Pasadena, California, whose value was built on defense, athleticism, and winning habits long before the NBA. At UNLV under Jerry Tarkanian, Augmon became a foundational piece of one of college basketball's most dominant eras. He was a starter on the 1990 national championship team and finished his career as the first three-time NABC Defensive Player of the Year from 1989 to 1991, a distinction that quietly speaks louder than his scoring ever did. Nicknamed Plastic Man for his flexibility and body control, Augmon thrived in UNLV's pressure system, guarding multiple positions, running the floor, and doing the connective work that allowed stars like Larry Johnson to flourish. NBA scouts saw him as a safe projection, elite athletic tools, high IQ, and no baggage. The Atlanta Hawks selected him 9th overall in the 1991 NBA draft, and he immediately validated the pick by earning NBA All-Rookie First Team honors. Augmon went on to play 15 seasons across several teams, rarely missing time and consistently finding minutes. But even early on, his profile was clear: impact defender, low usage wing, and a player trusted to support games, not decide them. Stunt number 1, his offense peaked before it ever grew. Stacey Augmon didn't enter the NBA unable to score. In fact, he averaged double figures in each of his first 5 seasons, immediately stepping into a starting role in Atlanta and producing solid numbers for a wing in the early 90s. He ran the floor hard, finished in transition, and used his athleticism to score efficiently within structure. Early on, the production matched the opportunity. The problem was that it never expanded beyond that. Augmon's scoring was tied almost entirely to effort and athletic advantage rather than creation. He thrived when plays were already tilted in his favor, leaking out in transition, cutting behind defenders, or capitalizing on space generated by others. But when defenses were set, his offensive impact lacked creativity. He didn't consistently break defenders down off the dribble, didn't stretch the floor with shooting, and wasn't comfortable manufacturing shots late in possessions. As the league evolved, that limitation became harder to overlook. By the mid-90s, wings were increasingly expected to generate offense rather than simply finish it. Teams wanted perimeter players who could force defensive adjustments, not just operate within them. Augmon never added that layer to his game. His three-point shooting remained unreliable, his handle stayed basic, and his scoring profile looked largely the same year after year. Because of that, his early production never translated into offensive trust. Coaches were comfortable starting him, playing him heavy minutes, and relying on his defense, but they didn't design offenses around him. When games slowed or momentum needed to be shifted, the ball moved elsewhere. His role was dependable but not expandable. Once his athletic edge softened even slightly, the scoring dipped quickly. Without a secondary offensive skill to fall back on, his value declined on that end of the floor. He remained useful but no longer central. Augmon's growth wasn't stunted because he couldn't score. It was stunted because his offense peaked early, never evolved, and left him without leverage once the league demanded more from his position. Stunt number 2, caught between positions as the league changed. Stacey Augmon entered the NBA as a positional in-between at the wrong time. He was too tall to be treated like a traditional guard and too limited offensively to be trusted as a primary wing scorer. Early on, that uncertainty worked in his favor. Teams valued his versatility, his ability to guard multiple spots, and his willingness to accept assignments without needing touches. But as the league evolved, that same flexibility quietly boxed him in. During the early 90s, roles were becoming more rigid. Coaches wanted clarity, guards were expected to create and shoot, wings were expected to score and stretch the floor, and bigs were expected to anchor the paint. Augmon didn't cleanly fit into any of those categories. He wasn't a ball handler who could organize an offense, and he wasn't a shooter defenses needed to chase. At the same time, he wasn't physical enough to consistently play bigger lineups or punish mismatches inside. As a result, his responsibilities narrowed instead of growing into a team priority. Teams trusted him to take on tough matchups, run lanes, and keep systems intact, but they didn't view him as someone whose role needed expansion. Players who are seen as useful often stop being invested in. Development slows, expectations flatten, and ceilings quietly settle. This became more apparent as roster construction changed. Younger wings with more clear offensive identities began entering the league, and coaches leaned toward players who solved specific problems rather than covering several moderately well. Augmon could help in many areas, but he didn't fix anything offensively. That made him replaceable. The shift didn't happen all at once. His minutes gradually declined, and his usage shrank. Not because he failed, but because the league stopped needing what he uniquely offered. His versatility, once an advantage, became a reason to keep him on the margins rather than commit to him fully. Augmon's growth was stunted not by effort or professionalism, but because he became a player without a clear box, and when the NBA demanded definition, there was nowhere obvious for him to land. Stunt number 3, longevity hit the ceiling. One of the most misleading aspects of Stacey Augmon's career is how long it lasted. 15 seasons in the NBA reads like validation, especially for a former top 10 pick. Longevity is often treated as proof that everything worked out. In Augmon's case, it quietly masked the reality that his role stopped progressing far earlier than expected. Once teams understood exactly what he was, expectations stabilized. Augmon became known as a dependable defensive wing who didn't need touches to stay engaged. He guarded, ran the floor, rebounded his position, and avoided mistakes. That reliability kept him employed, but it also capped how teams viewed him. Players who are predictable in the right ways often stop being developmental priorities. Coaches trust them, but they don't invest in expanding them. As the years went on, Augmon shifted from being a building piece to a rotational solution. Teams brought him in to cover defensive assignments, stable lineups, or provide professionalism in the locker room. He wasn't falling out of rotations, he was being cycled through them. That distinction matters because players who move frequently rarely receive the same opportunity to grow as those anchored to a franchise's long-term plans. His minutes gradually declined, starting roles disappeared, and offensive involvement shrank. Not because he stopped contributing, but because younger players with clearer offensive identities offered more upside. Augmon's value remained situational rather than essential. He could help teams function, but he didn't force them to adapt. Over time, the conversation around his career shifted. Instead of being measured against the star potential his athletic profile once suggested, he was compared to other role players, a comparison he often won. Longevity reframed expectations downward. What once felt like unrealized potential slowly became accepted limitation. In the end, Augmon's extended career didn't contradict the idea of stunted growth, it softened it. Staying around made his ceiling easier to overlook. He succeeded professionally, but the distance between what he was projected to become and what he ultimately was never closed. All in all, Stacey Augmon's career is a reminder that success and fulfillment aren't always the same thing in the NBA. He did what most players never managed to do. He stayed. 15 seasons, real minutes, real roles, and the respect of coaches across the league. That matters, and it deserves to be acknowledged, but stunted growth lives in a space between expectation and outcome. Augmon entered the league with physical tools, pedigree, and early production that suggested a higher ceiling. What ultimately held him back wasn't effort, professionalism, or opportunity. It was definition. His offense peaked early, his role narrowed as the league evolved, and once teams decided exactly what he was, there was no longer room for expansion. He carved out a successful career, but the version of him that once looked inevitable never fully arrived for these reasons. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.